The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
It is official. Bradley Beal is a member of the LA Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast.
The Clippers have gotten Bradley Beal. He has reached a buyout with the Phoenix Suns that will be stretching his contract over the next 5 years at $19 million per year. He was still owed $110 million, so he's giving up that $13.8 million or whatever it is to come to the Clippers. Because, he's gotten paid enough. So he is going to be coming to the Clippers, going to be reacting to the move, and then the pros of it, then the cons of it, and then what the starting lineup and rotation possibilities could look like. But man, oh man, ladies and gentlemen, I am back from Las Vegas, one of the times of my life. I feel like I told you guys all the major conversations I had with Clipper people. I didn't mention it, but I also got the chance to meet Kobe Sanders and Kobe Brown on the last night, late at night at the Aria. So that was pretty cool. So to say I went into this trip having not actually formally met any of our players, even though I talk about them and I'm like, what's the word? What's the right way to put it? I have one of the biggest platforms of any fan, if not the biggest of any fan, right? Does anybody else have a bigger platform across all platforms? I don't know. But you guys can put in the comments who you think. In terms of fans, I know we have like Adam, radio, and, guys like that, beat writers that get more views and stuff probably. But fan, I don't know. All I know is it's crazy. I hadn't known anyone. That sounds so arrogant when I say it. But I was trying to make it as factual as possible. But anyway, point being, I didn't know anyone, and then I met Jason Powell. Kind of like I already knew Dante Jones a little bit, but I reminded him who I was, and so now I feel like he'd always recognize me if he saw me. Chris Dunn now knows me, Derek Jones, Brooke Lopez, and of course Kobe Brown and Kobe Sanders. So pretty awesome. But we got to talk about. So, by the way, Summer League, very much recommend it. But, I was told all throughout Summer League that this was going to happen, and the news comes out that we're signing Bradley Beal. First off, the money, $5 million per year. We'll absolutely take that. $5.5 million for Bradley Beal, who was just making $50. Bargain. For people that think Bradley Beal's like bad at basketball now, you, one, weren't watching Suns games, and two, have extremely high standards, because anybody that's averaging 17, 3, and 4 on 50, 39, 80 splits, right? And last season, if you want to go a little bit more in depth about the shooting, a guy who shot from 56.5%, which was a career high for him in 2-point range, shot 76% at the rim from 0 to 3 feet, 54% from 3 to 10 feet, and 50.5 from 10 to 16. So his only areas that were under 50% were threes, where he was 39, which is still really good, and then 16 feet to the three ball, inside the three ball, he was at 42%, but he only takes that shot 12% of the time on average as of last year. So all those shooting splits, he's still a very good player. And I don't need to name stats to tell you what Bradley Beal is good at. This is a guy. Again, another guy, I've never missed a playoff game of his career. I've watched every playoff game of his career from game 1 against the Chicago Bulls in 2014. And let me just tell you, I'll never forget in my Facebook post, back then I was on Facebook like that, I remember saying the NBA playoffs are so great. After game 2 of that series against Chicago, where the Wizards upset the Bulls 4-1, I said about Bradley Beal, the NBA playoffs are so great because for those of us that don't have League Pass, we can watch every nationally televised game and realize how good guys like Bradley Beal are. So I actually, for those that don't know, and maybe some of you know because you remember how I told everybody I love John Wall. I was my favorite Eastern Conference team outside of whatever team LeBron was on, because I really did like LeBron a lot at the time. He was my favorite player for a while, which for those that listen to Dime Dropper are like, what? Yeah, I know. Long story. We can talk about that another time, but I really liked the Wizards back in the day. And so I was seeing their journey. And then personally, I think the Bradley Beal before John Wall versus after is very different. So I want to talk about that real quick. By the way, so just to make a very clear statement, good move for the Clippers. Now, what's going to happen next and how we use everybody, that is where it gets complicated that I'll talk about next. But in terms of you're putting a name, we had 9 rotation guys at this before this move, right? We have, let's say, the starting lineup from last playoffs, which was James, Chris Dunn, Kawhi Leonard, Zoo, and why am I blanking? Norman Powell. Okay. Right? So you have those 5 guys. Oh, no, Norman Powell's not on the team anymore, so I'd take him off. So let's replace him with John Collins, right? Slide everybody down. So those are our 5 guys. Then off the bench, we've got Bogey, which makes 6, Derrick Jones Jr., which makes 7, Nico 8, and then Brook Lopez 9. We don't think Amir Coffey and Ben Simmons are coming back, and we know the young guys are probably going to get into the rotation. So we need another backup guard. Bradley Beal comes in. If that's your 10-man rotation, just like those guys, and then order and lineups TBD. My bad. I shouldn't say order. Rotation and amount of minutes TBD. That's a really solid 10-man squad. Yes, we're old. Yes, we're a little slow. But you've got another big 4, essentially. And yes, people are going to say, let me get to the Bradley Beal part next, because there's going to be skeptics about Bradley Beal, of course. Not probably from our fan base, but around the league. Now, it seems like all the national media people are agreeing that, Bradley Beal slides right in for Norman Powell. He is getting $5.5 million a year. His production actually wasn't that bad. It was the price that or the amount of money he was getting paid that made it look so bad. So this is a home run for the Clippers. That's what a lot of media guys I've seen say on socials today. And I saw Shams Charania, Malika Andrews, they were speaking highly of it on ESPN. But let me just talk about the other side, which is that people are going to say, well, the Suns were a colossal disappointment the last couple of years. Bradley Beal had some part in that. Let's talk about that for a sec. So when John Wall started going through injury issues, the Wizards were terrible, right? And so Bradley Beal essentially got a chance to just go off, to just be the number one option. Because before John Wall was the face of the team, he was the number one option. He was the guy that had the ball in his hands the most. In 2017, which was, I think, when the Wizards should have made it to the conference finals, they lost that 7-game series to the Celtics, who were the 1 seed, but still, Isaiah Thomas led them. They didn't really have that same continuity that the Wizards had. Be a great series to rewatch, by the way. But John Wall and Bradley Beal were actually tied for the scoring leader on that team. So again, like John Wall was 7th in MVP voting and was averaging 11 assists along with those 23 points. So when John Wall got hurt in 2018, he only played half the season. Bradley Beal played all 82 games and averaged 23 points a game and was an all-star. And the Wizards made the playoffs and lost in 6 to the Raptors. But in the next season, it all started to change because that's when Wall was really hurt. Again, 32 games. Beal played all 82. He averaged 26, 5, and 5.5 assists and was the real man, but their team was garbage, right? And my friend Will Johnson always says that Dana Altman told him when he played for him, the bad teams still have a leading scorer. So that doesn't mean much. We know Bradley Beal was a good scorer.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Maybe the Cincinnati Bengals do. With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Bradley Beal finally gone, waived, soon to be stretched, and the era is over.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast.
The divorce that took forever to get done is finally finalized. Beal, it feels like the one that took the bigger hit in the divorce, right? Because he gave up however many million, but I guess the Suns will be giving up 20 plus million over the next couple of years as well. So, see ya, Brad. Sorry it couldn't work out better than we all thought it might.
So ultimately, Beal gives up 13.86, I think is the exact number, million.
Mm-hmm.
Ben, to make this possible, we've gone over it before because of the EJ Liddell and Nasir Little wave and stretches that the Suns previously did to make some other moves happen. They had a limit to how much dead money from Beal's contract that they were legally allowed to have on their books. He had to give some money back in order to make it all work out, and he gets a contract from the Clippers, which is the destination that had been in the rumor mill for a while now. Only basically the taxpayer mid-level or so. I mean, I don't think that's actually what it is because I'm not even sure if they're a tax team, but $5 million-ish, 2-year deal with the player option on that second season. Let's just start with that little part of the news and then zoom out, I think. Is it crazy that I was a little bit surprised that that's all he could get on this contract?
Well, no, man. And this is the thing that I kept on fighting with some other people about. I'm like, oh, he could get out and go get the full mid-level exception for multiple years. Bradley Beal, statistically, right? Good basketball player. If I'm not mistaken, like almost had a 50, 40, 90 season. Again, didn't play a ton of games. But that's my point, right? Bradley Beal is a good player to have, but he kind of is what he is. He's a microwave scorer. We're not sure if that's on the bench or in the starting lineup, and that right there is a problem in itself. Like, how much of an issue is this going to be if you're going to invest as much money as you are with a mid-level exception, potentially over multiple years? Is he a starter? Are you going to get stuck with him? Is that going to look like a bad contract a couple years from now? But it's the bigger thing. It's like, yes, Bradley Beal is a fine player when he plays. Not a good defender. And there's just like not a lot of places where that would work. The Bucks, I feel like they already went this route with Dame Lillard. Now, maybe they wanted to go down it again differently, but like that doesn't seem like it works. The Lakers, we saw that kind of floated out there. You're going to throw him out there with Luka, LeBron, and Ayton defensively? Like that's as bad as the Suns would have been defensively. So the Clippers made the most sense, and I think at that point it's supply and demand.
Yeah, the health is definitely the reason that he probably got the deal that he did. I just thought, closer to the full mid-level for one season was kind of where I expected it to go, but ultimately he hasn't played away because he hasn't.
Sorry, I was just going to say he hasn't played 60 games in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons.
Yeah,
is he going to get more healthier?
It's always something. No, he's not. But so. He goes to the Clippers. He gets all of his money anyway, so that contract didn't really matter in the sake of his wallet. I just thought it was interesting from the standpoint of his value, but it obviously closes a chapter for this team, a pretty momentous one and a very disappointing one. We all obviously could admit the trade I supported at the time. I've gone over it. You and I both have. I've always distinguished it as mistake versus misguided. I think that the Beal trade was a mistake. I think that the DeAndre Ayton trade, I think the DeAndre Ayton trade was more misguided. The intent with the Beal trade made sense. They didn't ultimately give up a huge amount, even though it was maybe more than people even expected Washington to get. And then once you just saw it on the court, it never worked out. What are your thoughts as we say goodbye to this kind of Big Three era and the Beal era here in the Valley?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man. I think the way you put it was really good because you mentioned at the beginning, I was for this, and so was I. I thought it was a slam dunk. Shamet, Chris Paul, bunch of first-round pick swaps that will likely never get exercised, and a bunch of second-round picks that like are currency in the NBA, but we saw the Suns just get 5 back in a KD deal along with players. Those can be had. What pisses me off is when people go after the Suns for doing this deal, when they themselves wanted this deal done as well. And there's multiple accounts that I've looked up, just Bradley Beal on their account, and went through the archives and like, oh, you were actually for this trade too. You loved this trade until it didn't work out for you. So it was a mistake at the end of the day. And I could say that too, although I was for it. In hindsight's 2020, probably a little too much redundancy in the offense. Shouldn't have looked over the fact that he doesn't play a lot of games. But I'm not going to condemn the Suns on this fact alone for trying, especially at the time with what they gave up for Beal. Didn't feel like a lot. And that Suns team, everyone forgets, man. Chris Paul felt like at that point, plays a little slower, feels like he started to wear out his welcome. Everyone hated Landry Shamet, and you gave up some picks that, yeah, man, it sucks. But I appreciate the swing. But at the end of the day, it didn't work out. I just wish more people would say that. I was for it. It didn't work out. It was a bad move. And I don't think a lot of people are being honest with the Bradley Beal saga.
Fair enough. He's gone no matter what any of us say at this point. I think that the part of it that I will say was misguided, that in hindsight probably was one of the reasons that it, not probably, it was one of the reasons that it failed, is not negotiating the no trade clause out of his contract upon his arrival here. That would have been, it was just overlooked at the time because you just assume it's going to, hey, he's just going to play. Why would you want to think about flipping a player the day you're getting him? It just wasn't part of the conversation. But given the relationship between the Suns front office and his agent, which is well documented with Josh Bartelstein working here, and the fact that, you know, the Suns were on his short list of teams. Obviously, he waived the no-trade clause to come here in the first place, all that sort of stuff. I think the Suns should have pushed harder for that and envision the fact that, hey, KD's pretty old. We have a small window here. Brad's contract's really long. We might need to get out of this sooner than we realize and give themselves more outs than they did. That was certainly a mistake. But, yeah, look, I think the final summation of what I would say on this is, I think that Beal, you can't separate the injuries from the performance on the court, because the deterioration of his body is what led to him not being able to be the player stylistically that the Suns needed him to be to fit with Devin Booker, to fit with Kevin Durant. He just lost the ability to drive and finish. He wasn't able to consistently defend, especially bigger players, which he needed to do in a, three-guard lineup a lot of the time with Grayson Allen out there too. Things like that just, they never were there because physically he couldn't or didn't feel comfortable trying to do it. And that is the part of it where in hindsight, it's like we could have seen that coming. And that's maybe the biggest bummer of it.
Do you think the Suns are going to regret stretching and waiving Bradley Beal?
Yeah, well, that's the other part. I mean, what do you think? Because I think you switched over to the side of not wanting this to happen a little quicker than I did as the offseason progressed. So I feel like you're probably more negative on this being the final call on their part than I might be.
Well, let's see here. Here are the positives to moving off of Beal. There's a very good chance that maybe he was just a cancer in the locker room and didn't get along with players or didn't get along with staff. And that's just a bad thing to have. Ultimately it feels like they were done with the Bradley Beal experience. So I get it from that aspect. And you don't have to struggle with the fact of you're either sending him home or you're sending him to the bench. So those things are good. And I'm not going to act like there are no positives to sending Bradley Beal out of here. I just think it outweighs the negatives, man. You're talking about $20 million, $19.6 million, whatever, a year until I'm 32 years old and I'm 27 now. Hopefully I have multiple kids at that point to where we're still talking about paying off Bradley Beal. And what's going to be frustrating, man, in 2 years from now, you and I are going to talk about some player being available. We're going to be like, man, wish we could get that guy, but we're paying Bradley Beal $20 million. I just don't, if I was for this, if there was a corresponding move that made sense for the Suns, even at least this year, but I don't think it's a death note, right? I just think it's making something that was a big problem for the next 2 years a slight a slight to medium-sized issue over the next couple of years. That's where I'm at. I'm not making it a death note. I just don't get it completely.
The Kansas City Chiefs made Trey Smith the highest paid guard in the NFL.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
There is a ton to talk about when it comes to this Trey Smith deal. A lot of money going to Trey Smith. 4 years, $94 million, a lot more than I ever expected that they would be paying him. But they got the deal done, and that's what's important. That's what really matters right now. So when you start looking at how this is going to break down, he's 26 years old. He will be 30 when this deal ends. And there is going to be some talk about, did they overpay him? When you look at the rest of the NFL guard market, he is $2.5 million above the next highest paid guard in the NFL. So it is very easy to look at this and say they overpaid for Trey Smith. The one thing that they have going for him, and this is something I'll talk about a lot more in the salary cap to update later, but one thing that they have going for him is they kept his cap numbers down a lot lower than I expected them to, and I will tell you how they did that in just a moment. But the thing is when you start looking at the salary cap, he's got a 14.25 salary cap number in 2025, which is going to add $9 million worth of cap space for the Chiefs in 2025. There's a lot that they can do with that. We will talk about that in the coming week. But next year in 2026, his cap number is 24.25. In 2027 and 2028, it's $27.75 million for his deal. He did get a signing bonus of about $17 million. So that gets spread out across the contract at $4.25 million per year. $46.75 million fully guaranteed, with $70 million essentially being guaranteed. And you do have a little bit of guaranteed salary in 2026, which is part of why that is such a large number, 46.75. But then he also has something that will kick in and will guarantee part of his contract in March of 2026. If he's still in Kansas City, his third year in 2027 will become guaranteed. Essentially, it becomes a 3-year deal for about $70 million in guaranteed money, which is all the $70 million is guaranteed for injury purposes. 46.75 is guaranteed currently under salary, but I do believe that in March of 2026, 2027 will become fully guaranteed. They would have to cut him in order for that not to be guaranteed, from my understanding of this contract, which means it's essentially guaranteeing him $70 million. The interesting thing I think on this is $2.5 million above the current guard market, which tells you that they were expecting that they were going to be paying him top market deal regardless. But it's interesting because they're paying him just a little bit more than what it would cost the franchise tag. If you take the franchise tag times 3 or times 4, it's just a little bit more than what they're paying him. It would have been like $93.6 million. At this point, it's $94 million. So they're paying him $23.5 million for the year. This is a deal that I expected to get done. I didn't expect it to get done at this rate. I did expect that it would be closer down to $22.5 million. So this came in at about $1 million higher than I was expecting on a year-to-year basis. However, this does give Kansas City a interior offensive line with Creed Humphrey and with Trey Smith that is one of the best duos in the NFL. If they can get even average to above average play at the left guard spot, and then you figure out your tackle situation with maybe Josh Simmons in 2025 or 2026, and you get Jalen Moore as your right tackle in 2026, I do think that you have at least 3/5 of this Chiefs offensive line under contract for, maybe even 4/5 of this Chiefs offensive line under contract for the next 4 years. Well, yeah, for the next 4 years at this point. 3 years, I guess, because Kingsley Suamata, if he is considered the starter at left guard, would only be here for 3 more years. So I do think that this is a great starting point for the Chiefs. I was a little surprised about the way that they structured the contract. $17 million in a signing bonus was probably a little bit lower than I would have expected, but they came in and they did something that they don't normally do. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next segment. But it is interesting that they structured the deal this way. This tells me that they're looking forward and they're looking at how this is going to affect their cap, not only in 2025, but how it's going to affect what they can do in 2026, 2027, 2028, as long as he's under contract. So I do think this deal becomes a lot more real, or a lot more sustainable and a lot cheaper feel to it once you get into 2025, because I do think that this is going to be a deal that is going to be used and probably beat even in 2026, and maybe even considerably. The cap went up a lot higher than the Chiefs were even expecting this year. That's the only reason they were able to franchise tag Trey Smith. They were expecting the cap to be about 270. It ended up being about 279. With that extra $10 million, they franchised Trey Smith. Now they get that money back and they're able to use it however they want in 2025, or maybe they are going to save it and roll it over to 2026. We will see what they do with that. But I do find this interesting that Kansas City has kind of changed, at least with this contract, the way they do contracts and how they structure their first-year deals. And I wonder if that does mean that maybe they're looking and trying to make some other extensions before, not necessarily before training camp, but before the regular season starts, kind of like they did with Noah Gray in the previous year.
We've all been there. Logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. If you're tired of endless scrolling trying to find the best deal, Gametime Zone Deals pick the best seats in your section for you. And with Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
What a day. What a day. The Texas Longhorns stole the show yesterday at SEC Media Days in Atlanta.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We have to talk about the mammoth recruiting day that Texas had. We did an emergency pod right after five-star linebacker Tyler Atkinson announced that he was committing to Texas on the Pat McAfee show. And we thought that was it. And hey, that would have been a good enough day, right? You get a five-star before lunch. You feel like you're set for the rest of the day. Hell, you feel like you're set for the rest of the week. But Texas wasn't full. Around dinner time last night, the Longhorns picked up another commitment. This one came from four-star defensive lineman James Johnson, who was previously committed to Georgia. Philadelphia. So on the same day that Texas landed the top-ranked player in the state of Georgia for the class of 2026, the Longhorns flipped one of the top-ranked players who was previously committed to the University of Georgia. And oh yeah, they did that in the state of Georgia on the same day that Georgia was here at SEC Media Days. Coincidence? I think not. What a calculated sequence of badassery from Steve Sarkisian yesterday. You talk about sending a message. It's exactly what Texas did to Georgia. And Kirby Smart was walking around with a scowl on his face all day yesterday because of, I think, what had happened on the recruiting trail. The Atkinson commitment, we touched on this yesterday, and made it back-to-back years that Texas has gone into the Peach State and stolen the top-ranked player in Georgia. Last year, it was Justice Terry, the five-star D lineman. Oh, by the way, Georgia offered both Justice Terry and Tyler Atkinson when they were in the 8th grade. These were guys that Georgia really wanted and guys that Georgia really wanted for a long time. And the Horns were able to swoop in and snag them both. With Justice Terry, it happened in December, right around National Signing Day. And with Tyler Atkinson, it happens here in the month of July. So, yeah, big-time message sent by Texas yesterday. And it almost feels unheard of, doesn't it? You think about how well Kirby Smart has recruited Georgia. And you think about how many great defensive players that he's been able to sign during his Georgia tenure. For 2 5-star defensive players in his own backyard to pick Texas, that is absolutely insane. If it's a quarterback, you would understand it, right? A guy leaving Texas to go play for Steve Sarkisian and his system, that makes a little more sense. But for defensive guys to leave Kirby Smart, to leave the state of Georgia, to come to the University of Texas, that's wild. And it's perhaps a sign of a changing of the guard in the SEC. And look, NIL definitely helps make that possible. Don't get it twisted. Now, I will say this, Georgia has money too. They currently have the second-ranked recruiting class in the nation for 2026. If you think all of those guys committed for their love of the school or the culture at Georgia, and I've got some oceanfront property in Arizona that I can sell you right now. NIL giveth, NIL taketh away. Recently, it hasn't felt like the NIL game has been on Texas's side. This time, I think it was, and it played a big part in stealing Justice Terry from the Peach State last year, and I think it played a big part in Texas picking up a commitment from the 5-star linebacker Tyler Atkinson yesterday. Speaking of messages, this is Texas sending another message that it isn't scared to go deep into SEC territory and play ball with some of the best recruits in America and play ball against some of the toughest teams to recruit against in America. It's awesome what the Longhorns are doing. Again, something we talked about yesterday. This is not just a Texas thing. This is not just a regional thing. Steve Sarkisian feels like he can poach players he wants from all over the country. He's not worried about competition. He feels like he's going to be able to get the guys that he wants year in and year out. That's awesome if you're a Longhorn fan. I got to hunch you are if you've made it this far in today's episode. A little bit more on James Johnson. He's from the state of Florida. Again, was committed to Georgia since June, but plays his high school football in the Miami area. He is the top-ranked defensive lineman in the state of Florida in this cycle. He's the 69th ranked player overall. Very nice. A 5-star, according to the folks at Rivals, a 4-star on the composite ranking, 6'2", 6'3", about 285 pounds. I found this scouting report online for James Johnson. Quote, explosive defensive tackle with all the fixings to make a living up front. More of a one-gap player than he is a two-gap player at this stage, but has the mass to dock in the middle. Added almost 25 pounds to a frame that stretches just over 6'2" between his sophomore and junior seasons, and he should be able to eventually carry 300 pounds or more. He owns some of the best throwing metrics in the Sunshine State for his class, and that lower body twitch constantly shows up on tape as he shoots out of his stance and is quick to put opponents on their heels. Raw upper body strength allows him to club his way around obstacles, while a near 82-inch wingspan makes it difficult for blockers to establish initial hand positioning. He projects as a potential difference maker at the point of attack for a college football playoff contender that can be stationed at different spots across the line, end quote. I know that's a lot there, but it's a lot of good. So I felt like it was all worth reading. That will play for Texas. And man, you think about Georgia and what Kirby Smart has built. You think about what Nick Saban had during his dynastic run at Alabama. Those teams were built from the trenches. Those teams all had dominant defensive lines. It feels like Georgia has had a first-round pick on the defensive line every year that Kirby Smart has been in Athens. It kind of felt the same way when Nick Saban was in Tuscaloosa. That is what Texas is trying to build. And that's a good thing, because look at what Georgia's been able to do under Kirby. Look what Alabama was able to do under Saban. We all want Texas to have that kind of success on the field in Austin. Hopefully it translates, but that's the recipe to win conference championships, to win national championships. You have to have those big bodies up front. You have to be able to win on both lines of scrimmage, and you are seeing Texas make a concerted effort to bring in defensive line talent. We saw it this offseason, 5 transfer portal additions on the defensive front. Heck, you saw it with the recruiting class in 2025, getting Justice Terry and Myron Charles and Josiah Sharma, 3 blue-chip guys, some of the best in the country. Sark's not hiding it. It is clear what he and this coaching staff are trying to build. And man, look at what they've put together so far in 2026. They have 4 defensive linemen committed. And that's not including the 5-star edge rusher, Richard Wesley, who is also a part of this class. You've got Vodney Cleveland, the top-ranked D lineman from Alabama. Dylan Berryman, the third-ranked D lineman from Louisiana. Corey Wells, the third-ranked defensive lineman in the state of Mississippi. And then now James Johnson, the top-ranked defensive lineman from the Sunshine State. That will do. This is far and away the best defensive line class that anybody has right now in 2026. Texas is building a monster up front. And oh, by the way, the 5 transfer portal players they added, most of those guys have multiple years of eligibility. So you're going to have a lot of those guys beyond 2025. You're going to have the 2025 class going into year 2 next year. And then this talented group coming in as true freshmen in a year from now. Yeah, the present is bright, but the future incredibly bright for the Texas defensive line. And by the way, with the Atkinson commitment earlier in the day yesterday, Texas now has 3 players in the top 12 in the entire class committed. There's more than any other school. LSU, as a matter of fact, is the only team with 2 of the top 12 players committed. Texas has 3. So the Longhorns putting in work all over the country, but they're putting in a lot of work at the top of the recruiting rankings. And this class now ranks 7th in the nation. It was 13th at this time last week. Remember what I said? Basically did a whole episode on it. 3 little birds. That's the mindset you have to have with Texas recruiting. Don't worry about a thing, because every little thing is going to be all right. You believe me now? Texas isn't done. There may be some more very good news coming very soon. Trust in Sark, trust in his staff. They have proven time and time again that they know how to recruit at an elite level. Yesterday, they proved it again. What a day. Again, to do that in the state of Georgia, taking the number 1 player in the state and then another guy who was committed to Georgia, doing that on the same day when you are with Georgia at your conference's media days in Atlanta. Oh, man, it's a good villain arc right there by Texas. I'm telling you, calculated sequence of badassery, impressive stuff. And what a fun day yesterday was to be a Texas Longhorn fan.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Maybe the Cincinnati Bengals do. With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Jalen Hurts was yet again disrespected, but this time by my own Locked On Podcast Network peers.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast.
I got no issues with what this network did for the Eagles. 7 players made the top 100. That is the most of any team in the NFL. Saquon Barkley coming in at number 10. A.J. Brown at number 16. Lane Johnson at 18. So 3 players in the top 20. Jordan Mailata and Jalen Carter come in at 29 and 35. Jalen Hurts at number 46. And then Zach Bond at number 60. Look, again, I have very little issues with this list overall. I thought the network did an incredible job. But Jalen Hurts being at number 46 is just ridiculous. I think it's gone just way too far with Jalen's ranking on so many of these lists compared to other quarterbacks. Look, I feel like I'm very realistic, very impartial, non-biased with Jalen Hurts. Like, I understand that he's not ahead of Patrick Mahomes. I'm not putting him ahead of Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow, even though he has the ring. He beat Patrick Mahomes, and those guys haven't been able to. I'm not putting him over the reigning MVP in Josh Allen. I'm realistic of who Jalen Hurts is as a player. I'm not saying he's better than those top 4. Those are the 4 top quarterbacks in football, even after the Super Bowl MVP season that Jalen Hurts just had. But to be ranked at number 46, like that's too far for me. I feel like he's getting dinged for a lot of things that other quarterbacks are not getting dinged for. I think he is held to a different standard than other quarterbacks. I think he's getting dinged for things like people believed Jalen Hurts coming out of Oklahoma Jalen Hurts before the 2022 season was a one-dimensional quarterback. He was a great runner and a very limited passer. And while that is true at the time, that evaluation of Jalen would have been correct. That is not correct anymore. But people will not move off their pre-draft, pre-22 opinions of him. They're bullish, and new evidence, new information has not been able to change people's minds. Whereas a Josh Allen, year after year, pre-draft takes about who he was at Wyoming, who he was in 2018 and 2019, this erratic, overly aggressive hero ball player, people have changed as Josh Allen has changed. Their opinions of him have changed. People's opinions even of Lamar Jackson have come a longer way than people's takes on Jalen Hurts as Jalen has evolved as a player. The discourse with Jalen Hurts has not evolved over the years as he has evolved as a player like it has for Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson specifically. I think Jalen Hurts is getting dinged for things like his style of play and his strengths compared to these other quarterbacks. I think his role in 2024 is affecting his reputation. I think also the support system he has in Philadelphia on offense, defense, the front office, the coaching staff. Again, I think there's players that have a lot of these same things that Jalen has, these attributes that he gets discredited for that they don't. And that's why I feel like he's being held to a different standard, even by my own peers on this list. Not to call out anybody specifically, but you guys messed up. Number 46 for the Super Bowl MVP, like, come on, that's disrespectful. And I'd like to disprove in this segment, I'd like to point out the contradicting evaluation with Hurts compared to other quarterbacks. The first thing I said was people have believed Jalen Hurts is a certain kind of player for years, and they're not moving off of that as he's become a different player. Well, who he was pre-2022, that's not who Jalen Hurts is anymore. Like, unless you're living under a rock, Jalen Hurts is a completely different player. Right after that wild card game against Tampa Bay, everything changed. Like, he is not that limited. While he still isn't the passer of Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes, in my opinion, he's not that limited guy of 2021. He's not the guy that got benched for Tua in the national championship. He's not the sporadic passer that he was at Oklahoma. And if anybody knows that, it's me. I was the biggest Jalen Hurts hater in 2021. And now I'm right now one of his biggest defenders, it feels like. And I do think because people thought of him a certain way and they didn't see him as a first-round pick, he's also suffering from, like, draft pick label. I think if he was a first-round pick, like even a top 32, doesn't have to be a top 10 selection, but top 15, top 20, top 32. If he was a day one pick in 2020 and he had the resume he currently has in the NFL, do you think he'd be getting ranked number 46? Do you think he'd be seen as, in the same light as he is right now? Or, like, if he was a top 10 selection and he played this style and he had the resume, he has the on-field accomplishments, are we really believing that he would be as underrated and disrespected as he is right now? I don't think so. So I think he is totally a completely different player, and I think he's proven that. Even last year, with his limited role in the offense, I think he's proven that he is not that. I mean, look at Super Bowl 59. The Jalen Hurts of 2021 is never answering that call against Spags' all-out pressure, is completely taking out Saquon Barkley. Spags kind of used the same blueprint that Todd Bowles did in that wild card round. It was a full circle moment. Jalen completely figured it out, and he picked that defense apart. So I just think that's completely incorrect. And if it's about his style of play, his overall strengths, well, his overall production and his overall accomplishments are just as elite as those other star quarterbacks. He just does it in a different way. Like, yeah, is he posting over 4,000 passing yards every year and over 30 passing touchdowns? No, but he's still getting around the same yardage as these star quarterbacks because while he's putting up around normally 3,500 to 3,700 passing yards a year, he's also putting up over 600 rushing yards and over 10 rushing touchdowns. And that's on top of 18 to 24 passing touchdowns that he's averaged over the last 3 years. So I think his style is what people don't love, but production is production. And Jalen Hurts is doing it in a different way. He's producing more like Cam Newton used to produce and Russell Wilson used to produce in Seattle. It's not the same way as it's not the same way as Aaron Rodgers used to put up numbers and Peyton Manning and what Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen do now. But it doesn't matter. Like, he's elite still. That's the thing. It's in a different way, but he's still an elite player. And I think his strengths, like, people don't take seriously his strengths. They don't put as much weight on his strengths as the strengths of other players. Like, he has an unlimited all-time clutch gene. It's one of the best I've ever seen from a quarterback. I think Jalen Hurts is one of the best big game ball players that we've seen in the NFL. Like, while he's not always a top 5 elite player, he's more sporadic than other guys. He is always elite in the biggest games, in the NFC Championship, in the Super Bowl, gotta have it moments in the regular season. And I wish that kind of stuff mattered more, but I don't think it really does. And if this is about, if his reputation right now is about his role in 2024 as a limited player that was kind of the Robin to Saquon Barkley's Batman, well, I think he proved in previous years, he proved first off in the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl this year, if the offense has to feature Jalen Hurts, you can win a championship that way. I think he proved that in 2022 as well, when he was the MVP runner-up. In 2023, the first half of the year, after that Bills game, that's like 12, 13 games into the year. It was 11 games into the year, excuse me. He was the MVP favorite according to FanDuel's odds. So if you think that Jalen Hurts is a limited game manager carried by an offense, well, for over the last 3 years, 2 of those 3 years, Jalen Hurts was the featured player of the Eagles offense. And in a year and a half of that span, he was an MVP favorite. So, and it's not like Josh Allen's role didn't change in 2024. Josh Allen's team went extremely run heavy this year. They were top 10 in rushing attempts. Josh Allen won MVP. Why is he not held to the same standard as Jalen Hurts? He kind of took a back seat to James Cook as well. Patrick Mahomes led the league this year in passes behind the line of scrimmage. His role was different than it was in like 2019 when he was slinging it all over the field. Why is Jalen Hurts dinged for changing his role as his personnel has changed, but Josh Allen isn't and Patrick Mahomes isn't? And if it's about his support system, look at the support system of Patrick Mahomes. He's had one of the best, I think the best play caller of all time is his head coach in Andy Reid. He's had the greatest tight end of all time as his number 1 target in Travis Kelce. He had years of Tyreek Hill as his receiver, one of the best deep threats in the history of the NFL. He's had an elite defense the majority of his career in Kansas City. His offensive line's been up and down, but he's had good offensive lines. He's had good run games. He's had good receiving cores. I think he has one right now with Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy and Travis Kelce. Like, Josh Allen's had a good team around him. Lamar Jackson's had a great team around him for years, and yet they don't get dinged for it, but Jalen Hurts does. And yet, when you look at guys that don't have as good of a support system like Justin Herbert, they get a pass completely. So you can't evaluate the guy that has a strong support system. You can't evaluate the guy that has a weak one because you make excuses for him, but you negate the credit of the quarterback in a good offense like Jalen, even though he elevates that offense, whether you like it or not. Who are we supposed to fairly evaluate? And I don't want to hear I saw Justin Herbert was ahead of Jalen Hurts. On these rankings, he's listed at number 39. Jalen Hurts number 46. Justin Herbert is 7 spots ahead. Justin Herbert is 7 spots ahead of Jalen Hurts. When Justin Herbert is 0-2 in the playoffs, he has a 52% completion percentage, only 2 passing touchdowns to 4 interceptions. He chokes consistently in the postseason. Jalen Hurts consistently rises to the challenge in the postseason. Like, those things have to matter more in these evaluations, and I just don't think they do. And I think Jalen Hurts, I think he falls victim to a lot of these things. He's held to these different standards that other quarterbacks aren't. I just can't take you seriously. If you're putting Justin Herbert or Jaden Daniels ahead of him, even Matt Stafford, I don't love that. I can kind of understand it because I think Matt Stafford is a top 6 quarterback in football, and I think Hurts is 5, he's 6, so it's very close. Both have a ring in the last 4 years. But if you put Justin Herbert or Jaden Daniels ahead of Jalen Hurts, I'm sorry. I can't really take your opinion seriously. So, look, at the end of the day, he's a Super Bowl MVP with a ring. He's outplayed a top 2 player of all time in 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls. He has the second most touchdowns of any quarterback in football since 2022. Like, the proof is in the pudding. Sorry, that's to me what matters. He rises up when the games matter most. He's a top 5 player when they need him to be. And I think right now they don't need him to be because they have a super team. But when they do, like Super Bowl 59, like Super Bowl 57, he's that guy. it's in a way that people don't always like stylistically. His strengths aren't always the strengths that people value as much. But for me, and again, I'm realistic. I'm not putting him ahead of Burrow, Lamar, Allen, or Mahomes. But to put him at number 46 behind Jaden Daniels and Justin Herbert and Matt Stafford, I think that's wrong. I think we messed up on that one for sure.
We've all been there. Logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. If you're tired of endless scrolling trying to find the best deal, Gametime Zone Deals pick the best seats in your section for you. And with Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast.
As we release our top 100 players in the NFL. And the opportunity to submit a ballot was afforded to all of the NFL hosts. And we submitted our ballots. They put it together, and we have a list of the 100 best players in the NFL. And today on the podcast, I want to discuss this with you from the lens of the Buffalo Bills. Which players made it, which players should have made it, and then just a lot of my observations about the list, in particular with how it compared to my own ballot. And I got to tell you, there's a lot that I disagree with. A lot. And we will unpack it here today. Let's start with who made it. And there's only 2 Bills players on it. That's it. Josh Allen and Christian Benford. We'll talk more about the players that should have made it in the next segment. But for now, let's focus in on Josh Allen and Christian Benford. So where does Josh Allen come in? Third. I had him at number 1. The consensus of the ballots submitted has Lamar Jackson at number 1, Patrick Mahomes at number 2, and Josh Allen at number 3. I do not enjoy the conversations that argue for one over the other, because what I don't like about those conversations is you spend all this time tearing down the other players to elevate the one that you prefer. But I want to start by acknowledging this. Those are 3 awesome players. Elite, tier 1 NFL quarterbacks. I think the Mount Rushmore of NFL quarterbacks right now is Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and Joe Burrow. That's the cream of the crop. But I do believe that Josh Allen deserves to be ranked number 1 among them. Josh Allen is the most prolific touchdown-producing quarterback ever. The most touchdowns per game in NFL history. He just completed his 5th consecutive season of 40 touchdowns. Nobody else has a streak longer than 2. This guy produces unlike any player the National Football League has ever seen. And then there was this turnover narrative that cost him a couple of MVPs, to be honest. And the context was always really lacking. Josh Allen always made up for his dues. Paid his dues and made up for any turnovers that he made. And when you look at the EPA lost on turnovers, it was always a very exaggerated talking point, but it's what people cling to. Well, Josh Allen just went out and had the greatest season in the history of the NFL for lowest percentage of plays that resulted in a sack fumble, or an interception. The best ever. Ever. 4.2% of plays. Never been better by any other player in the history of the league. So he just had the greatest season ever of taking care of the football and is the greatest touchdown-producing quarterback in NFL history. Player one. Reigning NFL MVP. And what I love about Josh Allen being the reigning NFL MVP is it's not because of volume stats. He didn't have the most yards this year. He didn't have the most touchdowns this year. But what everybody appreciated about Josh Allen and why he's the NFL MVP is because he did it while his supporting cast flipped upside down. 2 new starters on the offensive line, the whole new receiving core, no Stephon Diggs, right? The most meaningful player that he had over the previous 4 seasons, gone. Gabe Davis, gone. And he went out there and engineered the most prolific scoring offense the Buffalo Bills have ever had. The number 1 scoring offense in the AFC. Patrick Mahomes has lost parts, and he's become much less productive. Lamar Jackson had an unbelievable season last year, and you can't help but say, yeah, Derrick Henry came in and unlocked even more of Lamar Jackson. Josh Allen had parts stripped away and did what he did last year. Josh Allen's number 1 player in the league. Should be. And again, I hate the idea of having to tear other players down. I really do, because I think Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes are awesome tier 1 elite players. But my big issue with Lamar Jackson is the playoffs. 243 yards per game in 8 playoff games, 13 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. That includes rushing. 243 yards per game, 13 touchdowns, 11 interceptions in 8 games. Passer rating below 85. It's pedestrian. The best player in the NFL is Lamar Jackson, but he's not at his best when his team needs him to be. Couldn't say that about Josh Allen. Josh Allen's building an all-time playoff resume. Don't talk to me about Super Bowls. That's a team thing. Josh Allen himself, an unbelievable all-time playoff resume that he's building. So Lamar's got to come through when his team needs him the most, and he doesn't. And a lot of that's on him. Unforced errors. You saw it against the Bills. Fumbled the ball. Didn't get stripped from his hands. He fumbled the ball. The DeMar Hamlin play last year. I mean, the opening drive, he gets big-eyed and sees one high coverage and forgets to hold the safety and airmails one to Taylor Rapp. We know the pick 6 to Taron Johnson. That cost them in the first playoff loss to the Bills. We saw what he did in the NFC or AFC Championship game against Kansas City the year before. I mean, the guy's got to be better in the postseason. I can't put him at number 1 until he proves that. And look, Patrick Mahomes, he's on the Mount Rushmore of all-time NFL quarterbacks. But the last 2 years have been pedestrian for Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes has been the starting quarterback of the 15th ranked scoring offense each of the last 2 years. Last year, that team was 21st in yards per pass last year. I know that there was a lot of inconsistency with his weapons, right? They counted on Rashee Rice. He gets hurt. They don't have Hollywood Brown to start the year. Xavier Worthy's a rookie. I get it. Travis Kelce regression. I get it. And to their credit, I mean, he figured it out, right? He came through. They won 15 games in the regular season. They went to the Super Bowl because he's able to figure it out when it matters most, and that's what makes Pat really special. But this isn't a legacy list, right? Last 2 years, he's been the starting quarterback of a pedestrian offense. Now, look, I know they've been to the last 3 Super Bowls. I get it. I wish that the Bills had the defensive play calling in the postseason and the health with their defense in the postseason, maybe it'd be a different story. So look, Mahomes is awesome. Lamar is awesome. Josh Allen of late has been a little more awesome, and I think he deserved to be the number one player on our list.